They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but Eleanor Sterling decided to serve hers frozen on Christmas Eve. Her husband, Marcus, thought he was the smartest man in the room. He thought he could leave his 8-month pregnant wife alone in a blizzard to ski in Aspen with his 23-year-old mistress. He thought he'd come home to a warm fire and a forgiving wife. Instead, he came home to a house that wasn't just empty, it was erased. No furniture, no art, no money, and no wife. This is the true story of how one woman turned a billionaire's arrogance into his absolute ruin. You might want to sit down for this one. It gets messy. The notification on the iPhone screen didn't even make a sound. It was just a silent flash of light against the marble countertop of the kitchen island. But for Eleanor Sterling, it was louder than a gunshot. Flight confirmed. Aspen awaits, baby. XOXO. See. Eleanor stared at the phone. Her hand, resting on her swollen stomach, went cold. She was 8 months pregnant. Her ankles were swollen, and she had spent the last 3 hours directing the florists on exactly how to drape the garlands over the grand staircase of their $12 million estate in Greenwich, Connecticut. Everything all right, Elle? Marcus walked into the kitchen, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke Tom Ford suit. He was 42, handsome in that jagged, aggressive way that Wall Street loved. He smelled of sandalwood and expensive scotch. He looked at his wife, at the fatigue under her eyes, the messy bun, the oversized cashmere sweater, and for a split second, his lip curled. Just a fraction, but Eleanor saw it. She slid his phone face down. "Just checking the time," she lied, her voice steady. "Are you sure you have to go tonight, Marcus? It's Christmas Eve. The baby has been kicking all afternoon." Marcus sighed, the performance of the weary provider beginning instantly. "Elena, you know the deal. The merger with the Japanese firm is falling apart. If I don't fly to Tokyo tonight to smooth things over with Sato, we lose the portfolio. I'm doing this for us, for the family." "Tokyo," the text had said, Aspen. "Tokyo," Elena repeated. "Right. I'll be back on the 27th, he said, walking over and pecking her on the forehead. It was a dry, hollow kiss. "Don't wait up. The driver is outside." He grabbed his phone, not checking it, and grabbed his carry-on. It was a Louis Vuitton duffel, packed light. Too light for a business trip to Japan, but perfect for a weekend of skiing and expensive champagne with Chloe, the 23-year-old junior analyst he'd been mentoring for the past 6 months. Elena watched him walk to the door. "Marcus?" He paused, hand on the brass knob. "What is it, Elena? I'm late." "I love you," she said. It wasn't a declaration. It was a test. "Yeah, you too," he muttered, and then the heavy oak door slammed shut. Elena stood in the silence of the massive, meticulously decorated house. She heard the growl of the Porsche 911 starting up in the driveway. Not the limo to the airport, but his personal car. He wasn't going to JFK. He was driving to Teterboro Airport for a private charter. She waited until the taillights disappeared down the long, winding driveway. Then she walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, blanketing the manicured lawns in pristine white. She didn't cry. Tears were for women who had hope, and Elena had just lost the last shred of hers. Instead, she walked to the wall safe, hidden behind the Renoir in the study. She spun the dial. Her birthday, of course. Marcus was too narcissistically lazy to remember any other code. Inside were the deeds, the titles, the power of attorney documents. 3 years ago, Marcus had been under investigation by the SEC for insider trading. Terrified of losing his assets, he had transferred the title of the Greenwich House, the Hamptons Beach House, and the majority of his liquid assets into Eleanor's name. It was a temporary shield. But after the investigation was dropped due to a technicality, Marcus had been too busy and too arrogant to transfer them back. He assumed Elena was too docile, too in love, and too pregnant-brained to understand the leverage she held. Elena pulled the papers out. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had saved months ago, back when she first smelled the sandalwood perfume on his collar, but was too afraid to ask. "Hello?" A gruff voice answered. "Mr. Henderson?" Elena said, her voice turning to steel. "This is Eleanor Sterling. I'm ready to sell. Everything. But there's a condition." "On Christmas Eve, Mrs. Sterling?" the estate liquidator asked, shocked. "Yes. Tonight. And I want it cash. And I want the house empty by sunrise." The hours between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. were a blur of organized chaos. Mr. Henderson, a man who specialized in distressed asset liquidation for the ultra-wealthy, arrived with a team of 12 men and 3 large box trucks. They didn't ask questions. They only cared about the inventory. "The art?" Henderson asked, pointing to the original Basquiat in the hallway, Marcus's pride and joy. It was worth $4 million alone. "Take it," Elena said, sipping herbal tea. 50 cents on the dollar if you wire the money to the offshore account I provided within the hour. Henderson's eyes widened. "Done." They took the Italian leather sofas. They took the antique chandeliers. They took the 85-inch televisions. They even took the contents of Marcus's wine cellar, 300 bottles of vintage Bordeaux and rare whiskies. Elena moved through the house like a ghost, directing the dismantling of her own life. She went into the master bedroom and opened Marcus's closet. He loved his suits, custom-made Italian wool. She watched as the movers bundled them into garbage bags. "Burn those," she told one of the workers, handing him a $100 bill. "Or give them to the homeless shelter. Just get them out." By 2 a.m. the house echoed. It was a cavernous shell. The only thing remaining was a single wooden chair in the center of the living room and the Christmas tree, stripped of its ornaments, standing dark and ominous in the corner. But Elena wasn't done. She sat on the wooden chair and opened her laptop. She logged into their joint brokerage account. Marcus was the trader, but Elena was the one who managed the passwords. She watched the numbers on the screen. Total portfolio value, $28,450,000. With a few clicks, she initiated a liquidation of the entire portfolio. Because the accounts were technically joint tenants with rights of survivorship, and because she had the power of attorney he signed 3 years ago during his panic, the bank didn't flag it. She transferred the funds, minus a hefty tax withholding to keep the IRS off her back, into a complex web of trusts she had set up 2 days ago in the Cook Islands. Then she composed an email. To the Board of Directors, Sterling Capital subject, whistleblower evidence regarding Marcus Sterling. Attached were PDF scans of the creative accounting ledgers Marcus kept in the safe. The proof of the Ponzi-like structure he was running with the pension funds. It was enough to put him away for 20 years. She set the email to send on December 26th at 9 a.m., right when the markets opened. Finally, at 5 a.m., the snow had stopped. The trucks were gone. The house was stripped bare. The accounts were empty. Eleanor walked to the garage. The only car left was her modest SUV. Marcus's collection, the vintage Jaguar, the Ferrari, the Aston Martin, had been loaded onto flatbeds an hour ago, sold to a private collector in New Jersey for a lump cash sum. She put her hand on her belly. "We're going to be okay, little one," she whispered. "Better than okay." She took one last look at the cold, empty mansion that had been her prison. She didn't leave a note. Notes gave closure, and she wanted Marcus to have nothing but questions. She got into a car, threw her phone out of the window into a snowbank, and drove toward the Canadian border. December 27th. Marcus Sterling felt fantastic. The skiing in Aspen had been mediocre, but Chloe had been enthusiastic. He was tanned, relaxed, and buzzing with the adrenaline of having gotten away with it yet again. He had told Elena his flight from Tokyo landed at noon, so he timed his arrival back at the Greenwich house for 1 p.m. He pulled the Porsche 911 into the driveway. He frowned. The driveway hadn't been ploughed. The snow was deep, compacted into ice. "Lazy landscaping crew," he muttered, making a mental note to fire them. He parked and grabbed his bag, preparing his face for the exhausted husband returning from business look. He unlocked the front door. "Elena, I'm home. The flight was absolute hell. You won't believe the turbulence," he called out, dropping his keys in the foyer bowl. The keys hit the ceramic with a loud, echoing clatter that sounded wrong. Marcus looked up. He blinked. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. The foyer was empty. The console table was gone. The mirror was gone. The Persian runner rug was gone. "Elena!" Panic, cold and sharp, pricked at his chest. He ran into the living room. Empty. Just the hardwood floors gleaming in the winter sun. He ran to the kitchen. The Sub-Zero fridge was there. It was built in. But the stools were gone. The espresso machine was gone. He yanked open the drawers. No silverware, no plates, nothing. "Elena!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Is this a joke? Where are you?" He sprinted up the stairs, his footsteps booming in the hollow house. Master bedroom. Empty. No bed. No nightstands. He threw open his closet door. Bare walls. Not a single suit. Not a single tie. Not even a wire hanger. He stood there, hyperventilating. Was it a robbery? A kidnapping? But why would robbers take the clothes and the silverware? He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it twice. He dialed Eleanor. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He dialed the police. 911, what is your emergency? My wife is missing. And my house. Someone robbed my entire house," Marcus yelled. "Sir, calm down. What is your address?" 14. Oakwood Lane. Send someone now. He hung up and instinctively went to the wall safe to check for the emergency cash and his passport. He moved the spot where the Renoir painting used to hang. The safe door was wide open. Inside there was a single piece of paper. It wasn't a note from Eleanor. It was a receipt. Sold to Henderson Liquidations. Item: contents of 14 Oakwood Lane. Seller: Eleanor Sterling, owner. Total: paid in full. Marcus stared at the paper. The room spun. "Owner," he whispered. He remembered the transfer deeds, the tax dodge. He scrambled to check his bank accounts on his phone. Access denied. Account frozen. He tried his credit card app. Card cancelled. Then his phone rang. It wasn't Elena. It was the head of legal from Sterling Capital. "Marcus." The lawyer's voice was icy, devoid of their usual camaraderie. "Don't bother coming into the office. The FBI is here. They have your ledgers. They have everything. My advice: don't say a word to anyone." The line went dead. Marcus stood in the center of the empty room, the silence pressing in on him like a physical weight. He sank to his knees. The winter sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air where his life used to be. The silence in the empty Greenwich house didn't last long. It was broken by the wail of sirens. Not one, but 3 vehicles, 2 local police cruisers and an unmarked black SUV, screeched to a halt at the bottom of the icy driveway. Marcus, still on his knees, watched through the living room window as uniformed officers and men in FBI windbreakers swarmed his property. They weren't there to investigate a robbery. They were there for the whistleblower complaint filed at 9 a.m. that morning. The arrest was humiliatingly public. The neighbors across the street, the Vanderbilts, were watching from their bay window, sipping coffee as Marcus was marched out in handcuffs, wearing the same ski jacket he'd returned from Aspen in. He didn't even have a coat suitable for a court appearance. At the federal holding facility in Lower Manhattan, the reality set in. He was processed, fingerprinted, and stripped of his remaining dignity. He was allowed one phone call. He knew his high-powered legal team wouldn't touch him. The evidence Eleanor sent was radioactive. His friends on Wall Street were already erasing his number from their phones. There was only one person left. Chloe. He dialed her number with trembling fingers. She picked up on the second ring. "Marcus, where are you? I've been seeing crazy things on the news. It's all a misunderstanding, baby," Marcus pleaded, his voice raspy. "Elena, she went crazy. She set me up, but I'll fix it. I just need bail money. My accounts are frozen temporarily. I need you to spot me." Silence stretched on the line. "Chloe, are you there? I need 50 grand for the bondsman. You know I'm good for it once this blows over." Then came a sound Marcus had never heard from Chloe before. A cold, sharp laugh. 50 grand? Marcus, are you insane? You don't have 50 cents. What are you talking about? I'm Marcus Sterling. Not anymore, Chloe said, her voice devoid of the babyish lilt she used in Aspen. I've seen the reports, the Ponzi scheme, the fraud. You're done. And frankly, you were getting boring anyway. All that talk about your vision. God, it was exhausting pretending to listen. Marcus felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Pretending. Chloe, Aspen, what we had was a transaction, she cut in. I provided an ego boost for a midlife crisis billionaire, and you provided trips and jewelry. But the transaction is void if the billionaire is broke. Oh, and Marcus, that Cartier bracelet you bought me in Aspen, I already pawned it this morning when the news broke. Got a great price. You bitch, he whispered. Merry Christmas, Marcus, she said, and the line went dead. Marcus stared at the receiver. He was truly alone. The smartest guy in the room was sitting in a concrete cell, realizing that the two women in his life had simultaneously played him. One for justice, one for sport. He leaned his head against the cold cinder-block wall, and for the first time since he was a child, began to weep. Not tears of remorse, but tears of pure, impotent rage. 2,000 miles away, the world was silent and blue. Elena, now known as Nora Vance, thanks to a passport she'd procured through very expensive back channels years ago as a just-in-case, stood on the deck of a small, sturdy cabin overlooking a frozen lake in rural Nova Scotia, Canada. It was devastatingly cold, -20 degrees, but the cold felt clean. It felt honest. Unlike the climate-controlled perfection of Greenwich, this cold demanded respect. She had chosen this place because it was off the grid. No cell service, satellite internet only, and the nearest neighbor was 3 miles down an unpaved logging road. She had paid for the cabin in cash, bought a used Subaru Outback, and stocked the pantry for 6 months. Her pregnancy had become difficult in the last few weeks. The stress of the execution, the selling, the running, the constant checking under her shoulder had taken its toll. On January 15th, during a howling nor'easter that buried her Subaru in 4 feet of snow, her water broke. There was no time to get to the small hospital in the nearest town, 40 miles away. Eleanor, alone in the cabin with the wind screaming outside, had to rely on the stack of birthing books she'd read and a primal instinct she didn't know she possessed. It was 12 hours of agony. She screamed into a rolled-up towel, gripping the iron bed frame until her knuckles turned white. She channeled every ounce of hatred she had for Marcus into pushing. At 4:32 a.m., as the storm finally broke, a cry echoed in the cabin. It was a boy. She wrapped him in warm flannel blankets and held him close to her skin, weeping uncontrollably. She named him Leo, after her grandfather, a man who had worked with his hands and never lied to anyone. Over the next few weeks, Elena existed in a bubble of exhaustion and fierce love. She nursed Leo by the wood stove, watching the snow fall. She felt a profound shift inside herself. The old Elena, the one who hosted dinner parties and tolerated Marcus's condescension, was dead. Nora Vance was a survivor. When Leo was sleeping, she opened her encrypted laptop. She used a VPN that bounced her signal through 3 different countries before accessing the news. She read about Marcus's arrest, the denial of bail because he was deemed a flight risk. Ironic, she thought. The appointment of a public defender because he claimed indigence. She saw the paparazzi photos of him being led into court. He looked 10 years older. His hair was graying at the temples, his arrogant posture replaced by a slump of defeat. Elena felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was colder than she expected. It wasn't joy. It was just accounting. The books were balancing. But then she read an article in the Wall Street Journal detailing the scope of the investigation. The FBI was looking for the missing assets. They knew about the liquidation. They knew about the offshore transfers. They just couldn't crack the Cook Islands trusts yet. The article ended with a quote from the lead prosecutor, U.S. Attorney Sarah Jenkins. Marcus Sterling didn't act alone. We believe his wife, Elena Sterling, currently a fugitive, was instrumental in laundering the proceeds of his crimes. We will find her, and she will face justice. Elena slammed the laptop shut. Her heart hammered against her ribs, waking Leo, who began to fuss. She wasn't just a victim anymore in the eyes of the law. She was an accomplice. Marcus was spinning the narrative, even from jail. He was dragging her down with him. She picked up Leo, rocking him desperately. The sanctuary of the frozen north suddenly felt very fragile. She realized the hardest part wasn't leaving Marcus. It was staying gone. The Southern District of New York Federal Courthouse was a place designed to make powerful men feel small. But Marcus Sterling had never felt small in his life. Even now, sitting at the defendant's table in a suit that was a size too large, a consequence of 6 months of prison food and chronic stress, he maintained the posture of a CEO chairing a board meeting. But beneath the table, his leg was bouncing with the manic energy of a trapped animal. The trial had been dragging on for 3 weeks. The prosecution, led by the relentless U.S. Attorney Sarah Jenkins, was not just winning. They were performing an autopsy on his life while he was still breathing. Jenkins was systematic, cold, and brilliant. She didn't shout. She simply projected spreadsheets onto the massive monitors for the jury, tracing the lines of fraud like veins in a body. "Mr. Patel," Marcus hissed, leaning toward his court-appointed attorney. "Do something. She's putting the jury to sleep, and when they wake up, they're going to convict me just to go home." Rajiv Patel, a man with the patience of a saint and the tired eyes of a public defender who carried a caseload of 60 felonies, didn't look up from his notepad. "She's presenting the wire transfers, Marcus. Facts are boring, but facts are also what send people to prison. We have to wait for cross-examination." "Cross-examination?" Marcus scoffed, his voice rising just enough for the bailiff to shoot him a warning glare. "You're going to ask her if she's sure I stole the money? Look at them." He gestured subtly to the jury box. "They hate me. They see a rich guy who lost their grandmother's pensions. We need a narrative shift. We need a villain that isn't me." The lunch recess was called. As the jury filed out, avoiding eye contact with the defense table, Marcus was shackled and led to a small, windowless conference room in the holding area. The fluorescent lights hummed with a headache-inducing frequency. Patel sat down and opened a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Marcus stared at him with undisguised contempt. "I'm firing you," Marcus said. "You can't," Patel replied calmly. "Judge Holloway already denied your request for new counsel last week. You claimed indigence, remember? You don't have the funds for a private firm, and the court isn't going to delay this trial again." Marcus slammed his handcuffed fists onto the metal table. "Then start acting like a shark. Listen to me, Rajiv. The strategy we have, the I was negligent but not criminal defense, is failing. We need to pivot. Today." "Pivot to what?" Patel asked, wiping mustard from his lip. "The evidence is overwhelming. Your signature is on the accounts. Your IP address is on the transfers." Marcus leaned forward, a dark, predatory glint entering his eyes. He had been saving this card. He knew it was risky. It was nuclear. But Marcus Sterling operated on a scorched earth policy. If he was going to burn, he would make sure the fire consumed everyone. "We pivot to the truth," Marcus lied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Or at least, a version of it that creates reasonable doubt. You keep painting Elena as the victim, the poor, pregnant wife who fled the big bad wolf. But look at the facts, Rajiv. Who actually liquidated the assets? Elena. Who moved the money to the Cook Islands? Elena. Who vanished with $28 million while I stayed here to face the music?" Patel paused. "She fled because she discovered the fraud." "Did she?" Marcus smiled, and it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Or did she flee because the partnership went sour? Think about it. I'm the face of the company. I do the handshakes, the dinners, the TV interviews. But the back end, the logistics? Elena was a math major before she was a trophy wife. She handled the books at home. She had the passwords. You're suggesting your wife was the mastermind?" Patel looked skeptical, but his pen hovered over his notebook. "I'm suggesting," Marcus said, gaining momentum, "that Vista Holdings, the shell company Jenkins is pinning the bribery charges on, wasn't mine. It was hers. She set it up, she managed it, and when the heat got too hot, she cashed out my legitimate accounts, framed me for her side hustle, and ran." "Marcus," Patel warned, "if we introduce this theory, we need proof. Do you have proof she ran Vista Holdings?" "I have something better than proof," Marcus said. "I have absence. She's not here to defend herself, is she? She's a fugitive. In the eyes of the law, flight implies guilt. If we argue that I was merely a pawn in her scheme, a husband blinded by love, signing whatever papers his brilliant, manipulative wife put in front of him, it creates doubt. And doubt is all I need." Patel rubbed his temples. "It's a gone girl defense. It's incredibly high risk. The prosecution will tear it apart if they find one email linking you to Vista." "They won't," Marcus said confidently. "I was careful with Vista. I never used my work email. I used shared devices." He didn't mention that he had used her login credentials while she was hospitalized. He just needed Patel to file the motion. "Do it," Marcus commanded. "File the motion. Leak the theory to the press. Paint her as the Black Widow of Wall Street. Make the jury wonder if the real criminal is the woman sipping Mai Tais on a beach with their money, not the man sitting in this cell." The following morning, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted violently. Patel, following his client's instructions, abandoned the negligence defense. During his cross-examination of the lead FBI agent, he began to ask questions that sent a ripple of confusion through the gallery. "Agent Miller?" Patel asked. "Is it true that the wire transfers on December 24th were initiated by Elena Sterling?" "Yes," the agent replied. "We believe she was liquidating assets to escape." To escape? Patel pressed. Or to profit? Is it not true that currently Mrs. Sterling is in possession of nearly $30 million of investor funds, while my client has zero? That is accurate, technically. And is it not true, Patel continued, his voice rising, that the signatory for the shell company Vista Holdings is E. Sterling? Yes, but no further questions. By noon, the narrative had breached the walls of the courthouse. The media, starved for a twist in what had been a dry financial crimes trial, devoured the new angle. Headlines shifted from Sterling swindle to Sterling says she did it. By evening, the cable news cycle was dominated by the gold digger defense. Pundits argued over whether Elena was a victim or a villain. Photos of her from charity galas, wearing diamonds, looking poised and intelligent, were analyzed. "Does this look like a scared housewife?" one commentator asked on Fox News. "Or does it look like a woman who knows exactly where the bodies are buried because she dug the holes?" Marcus, back in his cell, watched the small television mounted on the wall. He saw the polling numbers shifting. Public sympathy for the abandoned pregnant wife was eroding, replaced by suspicion. He smiled. He knew Elena. He knew her anxiety. He knew her need for control. He knew that seeing her name dragged through the mud would hurt her more than the loss of the money. He was counting on it, flushing her out. 2,000 miles north, the world was not made of marble floors and TV screens, but of ice and timber. Elena, now Nora Vance, sat on the floor of the cabin in Nova Scotia. The fire in the wood stove had burned down to embers, casting a dull, dying orange glow across the room. The winter had been brutal. The snow was piled 6 feet high against the walls of the cabin, insulating them but also burying them. For months, she had lived in a state of hypervigilance, jumping at the sound of the wind, flinching when the grocery store clerk in the nearest village looked at her too long. She had created a routine to stay sane. Chop wood, melt snow for water when the pipes froze, feed Leo, read, sleep, repeat. She had convinced herself that she was safe here, that the world had moved on, that Marcus was a ghost from a past life who could no longer touch her. She was wrong. Her laptop was open on the rough-hewn coffee table. She had established a strict rule. Check the news once a week, for 10 minutes only, using a VPN routed through 3 different countries. Today was the day. She stared at the screen, her hand clamped over her mouth to stifle a sob that was trying to claw its way out. Defense claims fugitive wife architect of fraud. Where is Elena? Billionaire husband begs wife to return money to victims. The gone girl of Greenwich, inside the mind of Elena Sterling. She clicked on a video clip. It was Marcus's lawyer, Patel, speaking on the courthouse steps. "My client is a victim of a profound betrayal," Patel said to a sea of microphones. "Marcus Sterling trusted his wife. He gave her power of attorney. He gave her control of his accounts. And how did she repay him? She stole his fortune, abandoned him to face the consequences of her financial machinations, and kidnapped his child. We are appealing to the public. If you see Elena Sterling, do not approach her. She is desperate, she is wealthy, and she is the true mastermind behind the Sterling capital collapse." Elena slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the small room. She scrambled backward until her back hit the sofa, breathing hard, her chest heaving. "He's doing it," she whispered. "He's actually doing it." It was a masterclass in gaslighting, performed on a national stage. He wasn't just defending himself, he was rewriting reality. He was taking the one thing she had left, her integrity, the truth that she had left to save herself and her son, and twisting it until she looked like a monster. She looked over at the crib where 5-month-old Leo was sleeping. He was swaddled in a thick wool blanket, his cheeks rosy from the cold air of the cabin. Marcus didn't care about Leo. He hadn't mentioned his son once in the press conference. He only mentioned the money. He only mentioned the kidnapping. He was using their child as a prop to make her look unstable. Panic began to set in. Real, visceral panic. She thought about the man at the gas station yesterday who had looked at her Subaru a little too long. She thought about the satellite internet technician who had come last month. Did they recognize her? If she stayed here, they would find her. The FBI was now looking for a mastermind, not a witness. The manhunt would intensify. But if she ran, where would she go? She had a baby. She couldn't live in motels forever. She stood up and walked to the window. The reflection in the glass showed a woman she barely recognized. Her hair was chopped short and dyed a dull brown. She wore flannel and thermal leggings. She looked tired. She looked weak. "That's what he wants," she said aloud. "He wants me to be weak. He wants me to be scared." She pressed her forehead against the freezing glass. Marcus was betting on the old Elena. The Elena who apologized when the waiter got her order wrong. The Elena who signed whatever papers he put in front of her because she didn't want to start a fight. The Elena who believed that if she was just good enough, he would love her. But that Elena had died on the night of Christmas Eve. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in her chest, sharper than the ice hanging from the eaves. Marcus had made a fatal error. By blaming her, by claiming she was the mastermind behind specific shell companies like Vista Holdings, he had moved the battleground from vague accusations to specific data points. He had introduced facts that could be checked. Elena knew she didn't set up Vista Holdings. She knew she hadn't signed those papers. And if she hadn't signed them, that meant Marcus had forged her signature. She turned back to the laptop. She didn't close it this time. She opened it. She wasn't going to run. Running was for victims. She sat down at the table, her hands steady for the first time in months. She wasn't a hacker. She wasn't a lawyer. But she was a mother with $30 million in offshore accounts and nothing left to lose. She navigated to a search engine and typed in a query. She wasn't looking for a flight. She wasn't looking for a new hideout. She was looking for the one thing Marcus feared more than prison. The digital footprint he thought he had erased. "You want a mastermind, Marcus?" she whispered to the glowing screen. "I'll give you one." She began to type. The hunt was over. The war had just begun. The cabin in Nova Scotia, once a sanctuary of silence and snow, had transformed overnight into a cage. Elena, still living under the alias Nora Vance, sat in the dark, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating a face that had grown harder, sharper. The baby, Leo, was asleep in his crib, his soft breathing the only rhythm in a room thick with panic. On the screen, the New York Post article stared back at her. "The Black Widow of Wall Street," the headline screamed. Below it was the photo Marcus had released to the press, a picture from their engagement party 5 years ago. Elena looked young, naive, and radiantly happy. It was a weaponized image, designed to make the public hate her. Marcus was spinning a narrative that she wasn't a victim of infidelity, but a cold-blooded sociopath who had framed her husband to run off with millions. Elena felt a physical sickness in her gut. Marcus knew her better than she thought. He knew that Eleanor Sterling, the perfectionist, the people-pleaser, would be paralyzed by public shame. He was betting on her staying hidden, letting him rewrite history until he walked free and she was hunted down like an animal. "He wants a villain," she whispered to the empty room, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and a newfound icy rage. "Fine, I'll show him what a villain looks like." She knew she couldn't just walk into a police station. Marcus had the best defense attorneys money could buy, even now. If she surrendered, they would tear her apart. They would claim the documents she sent were forged. They would claim she manipulated the accounts. Without hard, irrefutable digital forensics, it was her word against a man who had charmed Wall Street for 2 decades. She didn't need a lawyer. She needed a ghost. Elena opened a browser she had installed weeks ago, one that routed her connection through a labyrinth of servers in Estonia, Panama, and Singapore. She accessed the dark web, not the sensationalized version she'd seen in movies, but the boring, bureaucratic underbelly of the internet, where information was the only currency that mattered. She navigated to a forum called the Grey Ledger. It was an invite-only message board for forensic accountants, corporate spies, and grey hat hackers, people who operated in the moral twilight. She posted a query, vague enough to avoid flags, but specific enough to attract talent. Need deep dive metadata extraction on a 2019 corporate server structure. Focus on user authentication logs and IP geolocation history. High urgency. Payment in BTC. Within an hour, her inbox pinged. The user's handle was Watchtower. No avatar, no bio, just a reputation score that was impossibly high. "I've seen the news, Mrs. Sterling," the message read. Elena froze. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She hadn't used her name. How did he know? "Don't worry," the second message came, seconds later. "I'm not a snitch. I'm an archivist, and I know a sloppy PR spin when I see one. Your husband's defense team is good at storytelling, but bad at math. If you want to bury him, you don't need a narrative. You need the logs." Elena exhaled, her breath fogging in the chilly cabin air. "What's your price?" $50K. Half now, half upon delivery. And I want the story, the real one, not for the press, for me. I like to know who I'm arming." Elena didn't hesitate. She transferred $25,000 worth of Bitcoin from her cold storage wallet to the address Watchtower provided. It was a terrifying amount of money to lose if this was a scam, but she was past the point of caution. She was fighting for her son's future. "I need to prove I didn't set up Vista Holdings," she typed, her fingers flying across the keys. "Marcus claims I created the shell company to siphon funds. He says I signed the documents digitally in November 2019. I need to know who was actually logged into the system and where they were." "Give me 48 hours, Watchtower replied. "Go dark. Do not log in. Do not check your email. I'll find you." The next 2 days were an agony of suspension. Elena paced the small cabin until she wore a path in the rug. She played with Leo, building towers of wooden blocks only to knock them down, her mind thousands of miles away. Every sound outside, the crack of a branch under the weight of snow, the wind howling through the pines, sounded like FBI agents, or worse, Marcus's private security goons coming to silence her. She barely ate. She barely slept. She replayed her marriage in her head, looking for the clues she had missed. The late nights, the business trips, the way he would lock his phone when she entered the room. It all seemed so obvious now. She hadn't been a wife. She had been a cover story. On the evening of the second day, her laptop screen woke up on its own. A secure chat window opened. "It's done," Watchtower wrote. "And Elena, you're going to want to sit down for this." A file began to download. Sterling Forensic Audit, Nov 19 Haunowantos PDF. Eleanor clicked it open. It was a dense document filled with server logs, IP strings, and authentication keys. It looked like gibberish to the untrained eye, but Watchtower had highlighted the relevant sections in red, adding plain English notes in the margins. "The creation of the Vista Holdings Signatory Authority occurred on November 14th, 2019, at 3:42 a.m. Est, the note read. The user logged in as Estelingas admin. This is why the feds think it was you. It's your login. Elena's stomach dropped. So he wins, she typed back, tears stinging her eyes. Keep reading, came the reply. She scrolled down. However, the note continued, I pulled the device fingerprint for that session. The login didn't come from your usual MacBook Air in Connecticut. It came from a device identified as Marcus iPad Pro Gen 3. And here is the kicker. I cross-referenced the IP address, 202.175 text, with global geolocation databases. Elena stared at the location on the map Watchtower had attached. The Venetian Macau Resort Hotel. Macau, China. Unless you were in a casino in China on November 14th, 2019, using your husband's iPad, Watchtower wrote, then you didn't sign those papers. Elena stared at the date. November 14th, 2019. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The snow outside, the cabin, the baby sleeping in the corner. It all faded away. She was pulled violently back into the past. She remembered November 14th. She wasn't in China. She wasn't even at home. She was in the intensive care unit of Greenwich Hospital. She remembered the smell of antiseptic and the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor that had suddenly, terrifyingly, gone silent. She remembered the doctor's face, a kind, older woman named Dr. Aris, looking down at her with pity. She had been 6 months pregnant with her first child. A girl. They were going to name her Sophie. Then came the preeclampsia, the seizure, the rush to the hospital, the emergency surgery. She remembered waking up in a fog of anesthesia and grief, her arms empty, her womb empty. She remembered asking for Marcus, begging the nurses to call him. Mr. Sterling is currently out of the country on a critical business merger, his executive assistant had told her over the phone, her voice clipped and professional. He sends his love and will be back as soon as the deal closes. He says to stay strong. Eleanor had lain there for 3 days, weeping alone in a private room, thinking her husband was sacrificing his emotional well-being to secure their financial future. She had forgiven him for not being there. She had told herself that he was grieving in his own way, by working. But he hadn't been working. He had been in a hotel room in Macau, likely with a woman, logging into her account on his iPad. And while she was losing his daughter, he was using her identity to set up the shell company that would launder his bribe money. He was framing her for a federal crime during her miscarriage. A scream built in Eleanor's throat, raw and primal. It wasn't a scream of sadness. It was the sound of something breaking, the last vestige of her love, her hesitation, her humanity toward Marcus. He hadn't just stolen money. He hadn't just cheated. He had desecrated the worst moment of her life. He had looked at his dying child and his hospitalized wife and thought, this is a great opportunity to set up a fall guy. She stood up, knocking the chair over. She paced the room like a caged tiger, her hands shaking so hard she could barely hold the mouse. Elena? The chat box pinged. You there? She sat back down. Her eyes were dry. The tears had evaporated, burned away by a heat that felt like molten lead in her veins. I'm here, she typed. I was in the hospital that day. I lost a baby that day. There was a long pause on the other end. Jesus, Watchtower wrote. Okay, this isn't just evidence anymore. This is a nuclear bomb. This proves identity theft, fraud, and perjury. And it proves malice. If you drop this in court, he doesn't just lose the case, he gets buried under the jail. It's not enough, Elena typed. Not enough? This exonerates you completely. I don't just want to be exonerated, Elena replied, her fingers hitting the keys with deliberate, heavy strokes. I want him to suffer. I want him to lose everything, not just his freedom. I want him to lose his narrative. I want the world to know exactly what kind of monster he is. She looked at the file again. The technical data was perfect, but juries could get bored with IP addresses. They needed a face. They needed a voice to narrate the cruelty she had just uncovered. She thought about the other woman, Chloe, the mistress who had mocked her on the phone, the 23-year-old who had laughed when Marcus left his pregnant wife on Christmas Eve. Chloe was a villain in this story too, but villains were often cowards, and cowards could be squeezed. Marcus had discarded Chloe the moment the money ran out. Elena knew Marcus. He wouldn't have been kind about it. He would have blamed Chloe for his distraction, maybe even threatened her. "Watchtower," Elena typed. "I have one more job for you, and for this one I'll pay double. Name it. I need you to find Chloe Davis. I don't care where she is. I don't care if she changed her name. Find her. Hack her phone, her cloud, her DMs. Find the dirt that Marcus has on her, and more importantly, find the dirt she has on Marcus. He's arrogant. He would have bragged to her. He would have texted her things he shouldn't have." "Tracing a burner phone is harder," the hacker replied. "But if she's a Gen Z girl who likes Instagram..." "She left a trail. Give me 24 hours. Eleanor closed the laptop. She walked over to the window and looked out at the frozen lake. The moon was high and bright, casting long, sharp shadows across the snow. She placed a hand on the glass. It was freezing cold. For 6 months, she had been running. She had been the prey, scurrying through the underbrush, hoping the wolf wouldn't catch her scent. She turned back to look at Leo, sleeping peacefully, unaware that his father was a monster. "No more running," she whispered. She went to the closet and pulled out a small, metal lockbox. Inside was the remaining cash from the liquidation. It was still a fortune, but it wasn't about the money anymore. She took out a fresh burner phone and dialed the number for the U.S. Attorney's office in the Southern District of New York. She knew it was 3 a.m. She didn't care. She would leave a message. She wasn't going to turn herself in. Not yet. She was going to negotiate terms. But first, she needed Chloe. She needed the mistress to look the jury in the eye and tell them what Marcus was really doing while his wife was in the hospital. Elena Sterling was dead. Nora Vance was just a mask. The woman standing in the cabin now was something else, entirely. She was the reckoning, and she couldn't wait for the sun to rise. And that is the incredible twisted story of Elena and Marcus Sterling. In the end, Marcus's arrogance was his own prison, long before he ever stepped inside a cell. Elena proved that sometimes the only way to win a rigged game is to flip the board and walk away. She gave back the millions to buy something money can't purchase. Peace. What do you think? Did Eleanor do the right thing by returning the money, or should she have kept it all? And what about the mistress? Chloe, was she a hero for testifying, or just saving her own skin? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of a story, please smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a drama. I'll see you in the next video. He stood in a room full of millionaires, wrapped in a designer suit, pointing at the mousy woman in the corner. "That's my ex-wife," he bragged to his new bride. "Sweet girl, but zero ambition. She'll be sorting books in a dusty library for the rest of her life." What he didn't know? That mousy woman, Serafina Walsh, was just one phone call away from inheriting a $50 billion tech empire. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's the story of what happens when the most underestimated person in the room becomes the most powerful. The grand ballroom of the Asteria Hotel was drowning in crystal and old money. It was the annual Starlight Gala for the city's children's hospital, an event that Seraphina Sarah Walsh had once attended on the arm of a man who commanded the room. Tonight, she was attending as a +1 of a kindly older woman from the city library, clinging to a glass of lukewarm club soda and trying to blend into the velvet drapes. Sarah was not a woman designed for ballrooms anymore. Her life, post-divorce, was a quiet melody played in a minor key, a small but neat apartment above a bakery, the scent of old paper and new coffee at her job managing the archives at the downtown library, and evenings spent with a rescued greyhound named Buster. It was small, it was safe, it was hers, but it was also lonely, and tonight it was humiliating. Across the room, her ex-husband, Marcus Thorne, was holding court. He was breathtaking in a way that was almost offensive, a custom Tom Ford suit, a 1,000-watt smile, and a laugh that boomed with the confidence of a man who had never failed at anything. On his arm was Chloe Sullivan, his new wife. Chloe was all polished blonde hair, Arctic blue eyes, and a crimson dress that seemed poured onto her body. She was, as Marcus had told Forbes in a small feature, the perfect partner for a man on the rise. Sarah hadn't wanted to come, but her friend, Martha, had insisted. "You need to get out, dear. You can't let him keep you hidden away." So here she was, in a modest navy blue dress she'd rented, feeling like a rowboat parked next to a fleet of yachts. She was trying to slip out a side door when his voice cut through the orchestra's lull. "Sarah? My God, is that you?" Sarah froze. She turned, forcing a polite, brittle smile. "Marcus, Chloe, you both look wonderful." Marcus beamed, sliding an arm around Chloe's impossibly small waist. "We feel wonderful. Chloe just closed a massive deal for her PR firm. And Thorne Consulting? We're landing the Hensington account. Big things, Sarah, big things." Chloe smiled, a vapid, perfect expression. "It's just so lovely to see you, Sarah. Marcus has told me so much about you. It's brave of you to come to these things. I know they're not really your scene." The condescension was a physical slap. "It's a good cause," Sarah said, her voice small. Marcus leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial volume that, in reality, was meant for the 3 other couples listening in. "You know, I was just telling Richard here," he gestured to a banking executive, "I'm the luckiest man alive. When I was with Sarah, well, she's a sweet girl, the sweetest, but no fire, you know, no ambition." Sarah's stomach clenched. She could feel the blood drain from her face. "She's happy in her little apartment, reading her dusty books," Marcus continued, laughing as if sharing a fond, harmless memory. "I needed a powerhouse. I needed someone like Chloe." He kissed Chloe's temple. "My true partner. We're building an empire together." The group around him murmured in agreement. Sarah just stood there, pinned by their pity and her ex-husband's casual cruelty. He wasn't just praising his new wife. He was actively painting Sarah as the before picture, the dowdy, unambitious creature he had rightfully discarded. "Well," Sarah said, her voice trembling slightly, I should be going. Martha is looking for me." Of course. Take care of yourself, Sarah. And hey," he added, a final twist of the knife, "let me know if the library needs a donation. I'm feeling generous." Sarah walked away. She didn't run. She walked, step by agonizing step, past the laughing millionaires, past the shrimp towers and the string quartet, out the grand lobby doors and into the cold, damp night air. She hailed a cab, her reflection in the window showing a pale, forgettable woman with tears welling in her eyes. What Marcus, in his magnificent arrogance, had forgotten, or perhaps had deliberately erased, was why she had no fire. She remembered a different night, 12 years ago. She was 22, clutching an acceptance letter to MIT's prestigious computer science postgrad program, a full scholarship in hand. She had a mind for complex systems and algorithms that professors called once in a generation. She was going to revolutionize data encryption. Then Marcus, a promising law student, had gone down on one knee. "We can't be a power couple if you're in a lab until 3 a.m., he'd argued gently. "I need a partner, Sarah. Someone to host the dinners, to charm the partners. You can do your coding thing on the side. But I need to make partner by 30. Help me do that. Help us." And she, blinded by love and the promise of us, had said yes. She had deferred her admission. Then she'd declined it. She learned to host dinners. She learned to charm. She edited his briefs, researched his cases, and built the social scaffolding that allowed him to climb. She didn't just support his ambition. She had been the fuel for it. And when he'd made partner, when he'd launched Thorn Consulting, he looked at the woman who had given up her entire future for him and decided she was unambitious. She'd been left with a small settlement, a deep, aching void where her own dreams used to be, and the label of sweet girl. As the taxi rattled toward her quiet street, Sarah made a promise to herself. She would never, ever go to a gala again. She would just be content in her small, safe world. She didn't know that her world, and Marcus Thorne's, was about to explode. The morning after the gala was thick with a familiar, post-humiliation haze. Sarah woke up, walked Buster in the pale dawn light, and went to the library, immersing herself in the scent of cedar and aging paper. She was cataloguing a collection of 19th-century botanical sketches, a task so precise and quiet it was almost a form of meditation. Her world was small, yes, but it was orderly. She was fine. She was not fine. Marcus's words echoed in the silence between the clock's ticks. No fire. No ambition. She was reshelving a heavy-bound copy of Gray's Anatomy when her personal cell phone, a simple, nondescript model, vibrated in her pocket. She rarely got calls she didn't recognize. The caller ID was a New York number, a law firm. Kensington and Reed. She stepped into the quiet staff room. "This is Seraphina Walsh." "Miss Walsh," said a voice, crisp as a new dollar bill. It was smooth, deep, and held an authority that made Sarah automatically stand up straighter. "My name is David Chen. I am a senior partner at Kensington and Reed. I am calling you on behalf of the estate of your great-uncle, Mr. Arthur Grayson." Sarah's breath hitched. Arthur. Arthur Grayson was the black sheep of her mother's family, a recluse, a genius, a ghost. While the rest of the family had settled into comfortable, predictable suburban lives, Arthur had disappeared into the burgeoning world of Silicon Valley in the 1980s and become a myth. He founded a company called Grayson Dynamics. He tinkered with robotics and artificial intelligence. He never married. He never gave interviews. Sarah had only met him twice in her life, as a child. But they had a secret. For the last 15 years, they had been pen pals, not via email. Arthur hated the vulnerability of the open net, as he put it. They wrote long, handwritten letters. She wrote to him about her struggles in college, her fascination with algorithms, her life with Marcus. He wrote back about philosophy, the stars, the flawed beauty of creating a synthetic mind, and his prize-winning orchids. When she told him she was giving up MIT for Marcus, his reply had been short and sharp. "A man who requires you to be small to feel big is a cage builder. Be careful you don't forget the shape of the sky." She hadn't heard from him in 6 months. Is he all right?" Sarah asked, her hand tightening on the phone. "Mr. Grayson passed away 2 days ago, Ms. Walsh, peacefully, at his estate in Northern California," Mr. Chen said. His tone was not unkind, but it was devoid of emotion. He was very specific in his final instructions. His will is to be read in our New York office tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. sharp. "The will? But I'm sure he left everything to, I don't know, a foundation?" "Ms. Walsh," Mr. Chen said, a slight emphasis on her name. "Mr. Grayson was exceptionally specific. Your presence is not optional. It is integral. A car will be at your apartment at 7 a.m. to take you to the airport. A suite is reserved for you at the Pierre. Please bring photo identification. We will see you at 10. The line clicked dead. Sarah stood in the staff room, the smell of burnt coffee and old sweaters filling her nose. Her world, so carefully ordered, felt like it was tilting on its axis. Meanwhile, 20 blocks away, in a glass and steel penthouse overlooking the park, Marcus Thorne was drinking an espresso and reading the Wall Street Journal. Chloe emerged from their bedroom around 10 a.m., wrapped in a silk robe. "Ugh, my head," she moaned, kissing his shoulder. "That champagne was divine. Did you see the look on Sarah's face last night? God, it was tragic. That dress, it looked like a recycled bridesmaid's gown." "She knows her place," Marcus said, not looking up from his paper. "It's where she's comfortable. Some people just aren't built for the fast lane, sweetheart. It's not a flaw, it's just biology." "Speaking of the fast lane," Chloe said, sliding a platinum credit card statement across the table. "The Amex bill came. We need to talk about the Hamptons house. The designer is insisting on Italian marble for the whole ground floor." Marcus sighed. "Chloe, the Hensington deal hasn't closed yet. Can the marble wait?" "Wait. Marcus, darling, this is our image. We're the new power couple. We can't have our guests walking on porcelain," she pouted. "Besides, you're the one who told me to build a life worthy of us. Don't go cheap on me now. What's the point of ditching the old model if you can't afford the upgrade?" Marcus looked at her pout, then at the bill. He felt a small, sharp pinprick of unease. He'd been leveraging his consulting firm heavily, betting everything on the Hensington deal. He'd told Chloe he was worth hundreds of millions. In reality, he was worth a fraction of that, and most of it was tied up in debt and speculation. He needed this deal. "Of course, my love," he said, forcing another smile. "Italian marble it is. I'll handle it." He looked back at his paper, turning to the tech section. There was a small brief on the bottom of page C4. Tech recluse Arthur Grayson, founder of Grayson Dynamics, dead at 78. Marcus barely registered the name. It meant nothing to him. He turned the page, thinking about marble and the high cost of his brand-new, ambitious life. The conference room at Kensington and Reed was on the 80th floor, a sterile glass box in the clouds that overlooked all of Manhattan. Sarah, who had been whisked from her apartment to a first-class flight to a luxury suite she was terrified to touch, felt like she was in a dream. She wore her only suit, a simple, well-maintained black wool blend that still felt inadequate compared to the severe, high-fashion armor of the 2 other people in the room. They were a man and a woman in their 50s, with sharp faces and the hungry eyes of vultures. "Cousin Desmond and Cousin Beatrice," Mr. Chen introduced them, though they barely glanced at Sarah, dismissing her instantly as staff or a minor beneficiary. "Let's get on with it, Chen," Desmond snapped, tapping his Cartier watch. "Beatrice and I have a flight to Aspen. Arthur was a lunatic. We all know it. Just tell us how he carved up the company so we can get on with liquidating it." Mr. Chen sat, a picture of calm, and opened a thick, leather-bound portfolio. "As you wish." Mr. Grayson's will is precise. He leaves his collection of 17th century maps to the New York Public Library. Desmond scoffed. He leaves his collection of restored World War II-era aircraft to the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Beatrice rolled her eyes. To his cousins, Desmond and Beatrice Grayson, he leaves the sum of $100,000 each, provided they do not contest this will. The air crackled. 100,000? Beatrice hissed. The man was worth billions. That's an insult. If you contest, Mr. Chen continued smoothly, as if reading a weather report, your share is forfeit and will be donated to the Arthur Grayson Orchid Preservation Trust, which I should add is already endowed with $200 million. Desmond and Beatrice went pale, then purple with rage. They were trapped. And now, Mr. Chen said, we come to the bulk of the estate. He paused, looking directly at Sarah for the first time, his gaze analytical. All remaining personal assets, including the penthouse in New York, the estate in Big Sur, the chalet in Gstaad, and all liquid assets, holdings and trusts valued at approximately $7 billion are left to his great-niece, Serafina Ann Walsh. Sarah stopped breathing. Desmond made a sound like a strangled goose. But that's... Beatrice stammered. Furthermore, Mr. Chen continued, his voice cutting through the tension. Mr. Grayson's controlling interest, 92% of Grayson Dynamics, valued at approximately $43 billion, is also bequeathed to Serafina Ann Walsh. Sarah felt the room spin. $50 billion. She gripped the arms of the leather chair. This is a joke, Desmond roared, standing up. She's a librarian. He was senile. We'll fight this. I would advise against that, Mr. Grayson, Mr. Chen said, as it would forfeit your 100,000. But more importantly, Mr. Grayson anticipated your reaction. He included a stipulation. He turned the page. The inheritance of Grayson Dynamics is conditional. It is not a gift. It is a codicil of trust. Sarah's head snapped up. Mr. Grayson believed, Miss Walsh, that you possess a mind equal to his own, a mind you have, in his words, allowed to gather dust. He is, therefore, forcing your hand. Mr. Chen looked at her. Condition 1. You must assume the role of acting Chief Executive Officer of Grayson Dynamics, effective immediately. You have 72 hours to accept the position, or the entire inheritance, personal and corporate, is forfeit. CEO? Sarah whispered, her voice a dry squeak. Condition 2, Mr. Chen pressed on. Grayson Dynamics is currently facing a hostile takeover bid from a rival conglomerate, Omnicorp Global. There is also an internal merger proposal being pushed by the current board, led by acting CEO Robert Sterling. A shareholder vote on this merger is scheduled in exactly 30 days. Your inheritance, Mr. Chen said, is contingent on you defeating that merger. You must prove to the board and the shareholders that you are the rightful leader of the company. If you fail, if the merger is approved, or if you are removed as CEO before the 30-day mark, you lose everything. The company, the houses, the money. It will all be dissolved and placed into the Orchid Trust. He closed the folder. The company's private jet is waiting at Teterboro to take you to the headquarters in Palo Alto. You have 72 hours to decide, Ms. Walsh. But the 30-day clock on the merger vote, that started the moment your great-uncle passed. You have 28 days left. Choose wisely. Sarah sat in the stunned silence, the sound of her own blood rushing in her ears. Across from her, Desmond and Beatrice were staring at her, their expressions a toxic cocktail of hatred, disbelief, and a sudden, sickening avarice. $50 billion? Or nothing. Before Sarah could even form a word, Mr. Chen's assistant quietly entered the room and whispered in his ear. Mr. Chen nodded, a flicker of something. Was it amusement in his eyes? "It seems, Miss Walsh, your decision may have an audience. My assistant informs me that a junior member of our PR team, eager to get ahead of the story, has just released the preliminary news of the will. It seems you are already the lead story on Bloomberg, CNBC, and every financial blog on the planet." He added, "Your 72 hours start now." The explosion was instantaneous. Back in New York, Marcus Thorne was in a high-stakes meeting with his Kensington clients. His phone, set to vibrate on the glass table, began to buzz. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. It buzzed with such frantic, relentless energy that it skittered across the glass, distracting the client. "Excuse me," Marcus said, irritated. He glanced at the screen. 14 missed calls, 32 text messages. The top one was from his partner, Jack Reeves. "Jack, call me, now. This is not a joke. Jack, turn on CNBC. I don't care. Turn it on. Jack, Marcus, your ex-wife, just inherited Grayson Dynamics, not a typo." Grayson. Marcus stared at the text. It made no sense. He mumbled an apology, grabbed the remote, and turned on the large monitor in the conference room, switching it to CNBC. The breaking news banner screamed across the bottom, "Unknown librarian inherits. 50B Grayson Dynamics Empire. Serafina Walsh named CEO in shocking will." A photo flashed on screen. It was an old, candid shot of Sarah from a long-forgotten charity 5K, smiling shyly, her hair in a messy ponytail. Marcus Thorne choked. He didn't just choke. He made a strangled, horrifying sound, spraying his $12 espresso across the glass table. The Kensington clients stared, appalled. "Serafina. Walsh," he whispered, his entire body going cold, then hot. That's my ex-wife," he said to the stunned room. The client he'd been trying to impress, a man who had been at the gala the night before, slowly raised an eyebrow. "Your ex-wife? The librarian? The one with no ambition?" Marcus's 1,000-watt smile was gone. His face was a mask of chalky, abject horror. Chloe, meanwhile, was at a high-end salon getting a blowout. Her phone, too, was exploding. When she finally looked at it, she saw the news alert. She stared at the photo of Sarah. She stared at the number. 50,000. Her manicured hand clenched so tightly that her nails snapped, digging into her palm. "That mouse," she hissed, her voice loud enough to make the stylist jump. "That nothing." Her envy was so potent, so visceral, it was almost nauseating. The woman her husband had publicly mocked, the woman she pitied, was now one of the richest, most powerful women in the world. Chloe's first gut-wrenching thought wasn't about Sarah. It was, he married the wrong woman. Sarah, oblivious to the storm she had caused, was on Arthur's private Gulfstream G650, flying over a country that was just learning her name. She was numb. Mr. Chen had provided her with a tablet containing the initial briefing. Grayson Dynamics, 15,000 employees, global leader in AI-driven logistics and experimental robotics. The board, hostile. The acting CEO, Robert Sterling, a 30-year corporate veteran who was deeply insulted by Arthur's choice. The merger. Sterling was pushing to merge with a rival, creating a massive, unwieldy entity that would make him and the board fabulously wealthy via stock options, but would, in Arthur's own notes, destroy the company's soul. She arrived at the sprawling, futuristic Grayson Dynamics campus in Palo Alto. It looked less like an office and more like a university from the 23rd century. She was met by a severe-looking woman in her late 50s with a sharp black bob and an impeccably tailored suit. "Ms. Walsh, I am Evelyn Reed. I was Mr. Grayson's executive assistant for 35 years. I am now, it seems, yours." Her tone was impossible to read. Was it loyalty or resentment? "Please, call me Sarah," Sarah stammered, clutching her handbag. "I will not, Miss Walsh. You are the CEO," Evelyn said, not unkindly. "The board is waiting. They have convened an emergency welcome meeting. Do not mistake them. They are lions, and you are, in their eyes, a small injured deer." Evelyn led her through an atrium where a massive robotic arm was painting a delicate watercolor, and into a vast, intimidating boardroom. 12 faces, all male, all over 50, all radiating hostile skepticism, turned to look at her. At the head of the table sat Robert Sterling. He was a big man, with a thick neck and a condescending smile. "Miss Walsh, Seraphina. May I call you Seraphina?" he began, not waiting for an answer. "Welcome to Grayson Dynamics. We are, of course, stunned by Arthur's decision." The board members chuckled darkly. "This is a multi-billion-dollar corporation, not a public library. We are in the middle of a highly sensitive, time-critical merger. This is not a place for amateurs." "Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, her voice shaking, but she forced it to hold. "My great-uncle. Mr. Grayson. He entrusted me with this. He was an old, sentimental fool." Sterling slammed his hand on the table just once, a calculated show of dominance. "This merger is the only thing that will save this company from obsolescence. Arthur was letting it stagnate. We vote in 28 days. The best thing you can do, Seraphina, is stay in your new office, sign the papers we give you, and let the professionals handle this. Do that, and you'll still be a billionaire. Get in our way, and you'll be the woman who destroyed a legacy in less than a month." The message was clear. Be a good girl and sit down. Sarah looked at the faces of the men who were, technically, her employees. She saw the same look she'd seen on Marcus's face at the gala. Pity, dismissal, contempt. She felt the old, familiar urge to shrink, to apologize, to flee. But then she looked at Evelyn Reed, standing silently by the door, her expression unreadable. "I will," Sarah said. "Need to review the merger documents, all of them, and the company's financials for the last 5 years." Sterling laughed. "Review? Honey, these are documents that would make a Harvard MBA's head spin. Just let us— Now, Mr. Sterling, please have them sent to my office, the CEO's office," Sarah said. Her voice was still quiet, but the tremor was gone. A flicker of surprise crossed Sterling's face. He nodded curtly. "As you wish. Evelyn, show Miss Walsh to her office. Get her settled." The office was vast, a corner suite with glass walls overlooking the campus. In the center was a massive modern desk, but in the corner there was an old-fashioned armchair and a wooden filing cabinet. "He sat there," Evelyn said, her voice softening for the first time, pointing to the armchair. "He hated that desk. He called it the monolith." Evelyn pointed to the filing cabinet. "He left this for you. The lock is your mother's birthday." Sarah, her fingers trembling, dialed the combination. The drawer clicked open. Inside was not a file, but a single, thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with red wax. It was addressed in Arthur's familiar, spiky handwriting. "For Seraphina, when they think you're a mouse." She opened it. "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the lions are at your door. Good. Let them roar. They have forgotten what a mind like yours can do. They see you as a librarian. They've forgotten the 19-year-old who sent me a 40-page letter correcting the flaws in my new encryption algorithm. I didn't forget. I've been following your quiet life. I saw you dim your own light to make a small man feel tall. I saw you atrophy. I am not giving you a gift, Sarah. I am giving you a sword, and I am giving you a shield. These men, Sterling especially, are thieves. They are selling my company not for profit, but to cover their own mistakes. They are not as clever as they think. You, however, are cleverer than you have ever believed. Your MIT dreams are not dead. They are just asleep. Wake them up. Look at the code. Look at the books. They're cooking them. Find it. Don't let them break you. You are a Grayson. And more importantly, you are Seraphina Walsh. You have the fire. I'm just forcing you to use it. Your proud uncle, Arthur tucked behind the letter, was a small, leather-bound notebook. Sarah opened it. It was full of handwritten notes, equations, and observations. It was Arthur's private ledger, his real thoughts on his company. Sarah stood there for a long time, the letter in her hand. The fear was still there, a cold stone in her stomach. But alongside it, something else was flickering to life. A spark, a tiny hot ember of the fire she thought Marcus had extinguished forever. "Evelyn," Sarah said, turning to the woman, "please cancel all my meetings for the rest of the day, and bring me coffee. A lot of coffee, and the last 5 years of financials. All of them." Evelyn Reed allowed herself a small, thin smile. "Yes, Miss Walsh." For the next 3 weeks, Seraphina Walsh disappeared. The media went into a frenzy. "Billionaire heiress goes into hiding," screamed the headlines. Is Sarah Walsh cracking under the pressure? She wasn't hiding. She was working. She and Evelyn Reed, who had quickly revealed herself to be fiercely, almost terrifyingly loyal to Arthur's memory, turned the CEO's office into a war room. They slept on cots. They lived on coffee and takeout. Sarah, with Arthur's notebook as her Rosetta Stone, began to do what she had been born to do. She analyzed complex systems. She wasn't just a librarian, she was a systems analyst. Her mind, which had organized the Dewey Decimal System to obsessive perfection, now devoured corporate spreadsheets, server logs, and encrypted project files. The board, led by Robert Sterling, sent her mountains of useless, redacted data. But Arthur's notebook gave her the backdoor passwords. "They're not just cooking the books, Evelyn," Sarah murmured at 3 a.m., surrounded by printouts. "They're running a whole ghost kitchen." She found it. A shell corporation, registered in the Cayman Islands, siphoning millions from the R&D budget. It was disguised as a consulting fee. A shell corporation that was, in turn, funding a series of high-risk, failing investments, all managed by Robert Sterling's brother-in-law. The merger wasn't a power play, it was a cover-up. Sterling needed the Omnicorp merger to bury his embezzlement in a sea of new, confusing paperwork. "He's not just a thief," Evelyn said, her voice tight with rage. "He's a traitor." "We're not ready to move yet," Sarah said. "We need to find the final link, the proof." She was no longer a mousy librarian. Her voice was low, confident, and sharp. The fire was lit. While Sarah was digging, Marcus Thorne was drowning. The moment the world learned that his ambitionless ex-wife was a billionaire, his own carefully constructed world fell apart. First, his phone. It never stopped ringing. Texts from men he barely knew. "Hey, remember me? Congrats on Sarah's news. We should golf." And from women. "I never did like Chloe." But the worst calls were from his clients. Marcus, the Kensington CEO, had said, "We can't move forward. The optics are bad. You publicly humiliated a woman who is now one of the most powerful figures in tech. It shows a spectacular lack of judgment." He lost the Kensington account. Then another. And another. His reputation as a savvy consultant evaporated. He was now just the idiot who divorced the billionaire. He tried to contact Sarah. Text 1. "Sarah, my God, I just heard. I'm stunned. Call me, we need to celebrate. No reply. Delivered. Text 2. Sarah, it's Marcus. Are you getting these? This is incredible. I always knew you had this in you. I always said you were brilliant. No reply. Delivered. Text 3. Serafina, don't be like this. This is us. You're my family. I'm worried about you. This Sterling guy is bad news. Call me. I can help you. No reply. Blocked. He was terrified, but not as terrified as Chloe. Chloe's PR firm was a vanity project funded by a trust fund that was rapidly dwindling. Her lavish lifestyle was built on a mountain of secret debt. She had seen Marcus as her savior. Now, he was the one with money problems. Do something, Marcus, she shrieked, throwing a $3,000 vase against the wall of their penthouse. She's your ex-wife. You were married to her. You should be entitled to half of that. That's not how divorce works, Chloe, Marcus yelled back, his own panic making him cruel. I signed the papers. It's over. Then make it not over, she screamed. Find some dirt on her. Find anything. I will not be poor. I will not go back to being a nobody. Chloe, propelled by a desperate, venomous envy, started to make calls. She called old friends, distant relatives of Sarah's, anyone who had known them as a couple. She was digging for a scandal, a weakness, anything she could use to either blackmail Sarah or destroy her. And Marcus was looking at his own company's financials. Thorne Consulting was about to go bankrupt. His only remaining major client, a mid-level software company called Analytica Solutions, was keeping him afloat. He was reviewing the Analytica contract when he saw a clause he'd never paid attention to. Analytica Solutions had just been acquired, 3 months prior, in a quiet deal. It had been bought by Grayson Dynamics. Marcus's blood ran ice cold. His last lifeline, the only contract paying his bills, was owned by his ex-wife's new company. Serafina Walsh now had the power to sign or to terminate, the one thing keeping him from total ruin. He stared at the contract. The renewal date was in 1 week, the day of the shareholder vote. He had to get to her. He had to beg. Chloe struck first. 2 days before the shareholder meeting, a salacious story dropped on a major gossip blog. The Gilded Cage. Exclusive. Billionaire heiress. A volatile recluse, say sources. Fears for mental stability. The article was a masterpiece of innuendo, crafted by Chloe's PR-trained hands and fed to the blogger. It featured anonymous quotes. She was always unstable. After the divorce, she had a complete breakdown. She barely left her apartment for 6 months. It included photos. Paparazzi shots of Sarah, looking exhausted and pale in her old coat, walking Buster. But worse, it included private photos from the divorce. Sarah, crying, her face blotchy, taken by Marcus himself, and saved on a shared cloud Chloe had access to. The story was devastating. It painted Sarah not as a hard-working CEO, but as a fragile, heartbroken woman crumbling under pressure. Robert Sterling pounced. He called an emergency confidence meeting of the board, scheduled for the morning of the full shareholder vote. The media was alerted. The narrative was set. The board was concerned for Ms. Walsh's well-being. They were going to relieve her of her burden and approve the merger to stabilize the company. The morning of the vote, Sarah Walsh walked into the boardroom. The lions were all there, their faces grave and sympathetic, which was far more terrifying than their open hostility. The room was packed. Financial press, board members, key shareholders. Serafina, Robert Sterling began, his voice dripping with false concern. We have all seen these disturbing reports. We are worried about you. This has been too much, too fast. We, the board, have prepared a motion. We are voting to relieve you of your duties as CEO for your own health. We will table the merger vote until—" No. The word was not loud, but it was so cold, so absolute, that it cut off Sterling's speech. Sarah Walsh stood at the podium. She was not the woman from the gala. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She wore a dark grey, armour-like suit. The only colour on her was a flash of crimson lipstick. She looked, as one reporter later wrote, like a queen about to sign an execution order. "You will not table the merger vote, Mr. Sterling, because we are all going to vote no," Sarah said. "Now, Serafina, be reasonable," Sterling said, trying to regain control. "You're clearly unwell." "Unwell?" Sarah smiled, a chilling, humourless expression. "No, Mr. Sterling, I'm just angry." She clicked a remote. The massive screen behind her, which was supposed to show Sterling's motion, flashed to life. It showed a bank flowchart. "This," Sarah said, her voice resonating with power, "is a shell corporation called Apex Capital Partners, registered in the Cayman Islands." Sterling's face went from pink to white. "For 3 years, you have been approving consulting payments to Apex, payments totaling $87 million. You did this, you claimed, for external R&D. But Apex has no employees. It has no office. It has one bank account, which then funnels money to a series of unfortunate personal investments." She clicked again. A photo of a lavish, half-built mansion in Turks and Caicos appeared, all owned by your brother-in-law, Mr. Gerald Vance. The room gasped. The board members stared at Sterling, their faces now masks of horror. "The Omnicorp merger," Sarah continued, her voice icy, "was never about saving this company. It was about burying this. You were going to let Omnicorp absorb us, liquidate our best projects, and lay off 4,000 employees, all to hide your $87 million theft." Sterling was sputtering. This is slander. It's a fabrication." "Is it?" Sarah clicked again. The screen filled with an email from Sterling to his brother-in-law. "The merger will solve everything. The old books will be buried. Just keep the project going." "You may have forgotten, Mr. Sterling," Sarah said, "but my uncle was an encryption expert, and I, as you so helpfully pointed out, am a librarian. I'm very, very good at finding things." She looked at the stunned board. "The merger is dead, as is Mr. Sterling's career. Security?" 2 large men stepped forward and flanked Sterling, who looked as if he'd been shot. "But the leadership," one board member stammered. "The company, the stability, the articles." "The articles," Sarah said, "were a pathetic, desperate smear campaign planted by a woman with over $2 million in credit card debt and a failing PR firm. A woman who, I believe, is married to—" The doors of the boardroom burst open. It was Marcus Thorne. He was not the polished man from the gala. His suit was wrinkled. He hadn't shaved. His eyes were wild with desperation. Sarah, stop!" he yelled, pushing past security. He ran to the podium, his voice dropping to a desperate, private beg, though the whole room could hear. "Sarah, please don't! You can't! My company! The Analytica contract! You own it now! Sarah, please, I'm begging you! I'm ruined! Chloe, she's ruined me!" He actually grabbed her arm. "I'll do anything. I'll leave her. We can talk. I always loved you, Sarah. I was an idiot." Sarah looked at his hand on her arm. She looked at his terrified, pleading face. This was the man who had called her ambitionless. The man who had mocked her for his own amusement. The man who had, as her uncle said, built a cage for her. She did not pull her arm away. She simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the silent, shocked room. "Get your hand off me." He flinched, snatching it back as if burned. "Your partnership with Chloe Sullivan is your own business," Sarah said, her eyes boring into his. "As for the articles she planted, attempting to defame me and manipulate the stock of this company, our legal team will be in touch with her shortly. I believe that's called stock market manipulation and libel." Marcus's face crumpled. "As for Thorne Consulting," she continued, "your contract with Analytica Solutions is indeed up for renewal today." "Evelyn?" Evelyn Reed stepped forward, holding a single file. She opened it. "After a review of your firm's performance, billing practices, and recent reputational liabilities, Grayson Dynamics has decided to terminate the contract, effective immediately." "No," Marcus whispered. He sank to his knees. "No, Sarah, please." "My name," she said, looking down at the broken man at her feet, "is Ms. Walsh, and this meeting is for shareholders only. Security. Please remove Mr. Thorne." As he was dragged out, protesting and begging, Sarah turned back to the podium and the speechless room. She straightened her suit jacket. "All business." "Now," she said, "let's talk about the real future of Grayson Dynamics. I have a 10-year plan. It doesn't involve being absorbed. It involves acquiring, starting with Omnicorp's entire AI division. Page 1 of the new presentation. Please, Evelyn." The silence that fell over the boardroom after Marcus Thorne was hauled, shouting and pathetic, from the room was absolute. It was the silence of an execution, followed by a coronation. The remaining board members, who just 10 minutes earlier had been ready to depose her, now stared at Seraphina Walsh as if she were a new, terrifying species of predator. Robert Sterling was gone, his face a mask of grey disbelief, led away by security for the authorities. The smear campaign had been diffused. The ambitionless ex-wife was a fabrication. The woman at the podium was all that was real. Sarah, in the quiet, didn't sit. She didn't waver. She simply took a sip of water and clicked to the next slide of her presentation. "Now," she said, her voice as calm and clear as a winter morning. "As I was saying, the 10-year plan." For the next hour she laid it out, not as a plea, but as a decree. She eviscerated the faulty logic of the Omnicorp merger, pointing out redundancies and asset-stripping intentions they had all conveniently overlooked. Then she presented her own vision, an aggressive expansion into ethical AI, the reopening of Arthur's Project Daedalus for advanced robotics, and the strategic acquisition of 2 key competitors. "We are not a company that waits to be absorbed, gentlemen," she concluded, her eyes sweeping over every face. "We are a company that hunts. We will not be selling our soul. We will be buying the future." When she finished, there was another beat of silence. Then, the oldest member of the board, a man named Henry Blackwood, who had been Arthur's contemporary, slowly began to clap. The others, one by one, joined him. It wasn't the polite applause of a boardroom. It was the stunned, fervent applause of survivors. "A vote," Henry said, his voice hoarse, "all in favor of confirming Seraphina Walsh as permanent CEO and approving her proposed 10-year strategic plan." Every single hand went up, instantly. "And all in favor," Henry continued, his eyes glittering, "of filing a civil suit against Mr. Sterling and his associates, and providing all of Ms. Walsh's evidence to the district attorney." Every hand went up again. Sarah nodded once. "Thank you, gentlemen. Evelyn, please schedule the first acquisition review for 7 a.m. tomorrow. This meeting is adjourned." She walked out of the room, not to the sound of whispers, but to the sound of frantic, terrified phone calls as the board members scrambled to get on the right side of history. Her history. The downfalls were not a slow decline. They were an avalanche. Robert Sterling was the first to fall, charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities fraud. He was facing decades in prison. He tried to claim Serafina had fabricated the evidence. The digital trail she and Evelyn had uncovered was so perfect, so irrefutable, that his defense lawyer quit. He was ruined, his name becoming a verb in Silicon Valley for spectacular self-destruction. Chloe Sullivan Thorne was next. The lawsuit from Grayson Dynamics landed on her pristine marble coffee table the same day her American Express Centurion card was declined. The suit for defamation, libel, and conspiracy to commit stock manipulation was for $100 million. Her secret debts, no longer propped up by Marcus's dwindling credit, were called in. She found Marcus in their penthouse, staring blankly at a television that was reporting on his own ex-wife's genius boardroom coup. "You have to fix this," Chloe shrieked, waving the lawsuit. "She's suing me! Me! This is your fault! You picked her! You left her! You didn't even get half!" Marcus turned, his face a hollow mask. The arrogance was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a terrified, petty man. "My fault," he whispered. You're the one who planted the story. You're the one who poked the bear, you idiot. You poked a dragon. I was trying to help us." "There is no us," Marcus roared, finally snapping. "There is just you and your debt and the mess you made. You and your endless empty ambition." The irony of his own words was lost on him. Their divorce was not a polite separation. It was a scorched earth battle between two rats on a sinking ship. Chloe, in a final desperate move, sold a tell-all to a reality show, Billionaire Ex-Wives, after the fall. The show was cancelled after 3 episodes for low ratings. She was last seen selling high-end real estate in Scottsdale, using her maiden name. Marcus Thorne's fate was, in many ways, the most poetic. Thorne Consulting evaporated in 72 hours. He filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. The penthouse, the suits, the watches, the custom-built life, all liquidated at auction. He was left with nothing but a reputation as the single biggest fool in modern financial history. The man who had bragged about his ex-wife's zero ambition became a global laughingstock. He found a job, eventually. An entry-level analyst position at a small, faceless firm in Wilmington, Delaware. He shared a 2-bedroom apartment with another divorced analyst. He wore off-the-rack suits. He was, in the end, precisely the kind of man he had always despised. A nobody. 6 months later, the main hall at the World Economic Forum in Davos was packed. The air hummed with the energy of presidents, prime ministers, and the most powerful CEOs on Earth. The keynote speaker this year was the most talked-about woman in the world, Serafina Walsh. When she walked onto the stage, it was a universe away from her entrance at the Starlight Gala. She wore a simple, elegant, dark blue dress, her hair pulled back. She was not in armor. She was simply, powerfully, herself. She looked out at the sea of faces, and this time, she was the one they had all come to see. "For a long time," she began, her voice filling the massive hall, "I was told that ambition was loud, that success was a performance. I was taught that if you were quiet, you were invisible. If you were supportive, you were unambitious. If you were a librarian, you were a librarian." A soft, knowing laugh rippled through the audience. I am here to tell you that the most revolutionary ideas are often born in the quietest rooms. The strongest foundations are built not by the loudest voice, but by the most observant mind. My great-uncle, Arthur Grayson, built an empire because he listened to the code. I plan to honor his legacy by listening to the world." She didn't just talk about AI and robotics. She announced the Serafina Grayson Grant, a $2 billion endowment. "This grant," she said, "is for women in STEM. But specifically, it is for the women who took a detour, the ones who were told to step back to support someone else's dream, the ones who dimmed their own light to make small men feel tall. This is for you. Your detour is over. Welcome back." The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. Later that evening, in the private lounge for speakers, she was approached by Evelyn Reed, who was, as always, a bastion of calm efficiency. "Ms. Walsh, a remarkable speech," Evelyn said, handing her a tablet. "The acquisition of the Tokyo lab is complete, and a final item from the Thorn bankruptcy auction closed today." "Oh," Sarah said, barely looking up from the acquisition data. "Yes, it was his private wine collection. Apparently he was very proud of it. The trustees were asking if you'd like to place a bid. It's all that's left of his estate." Serafina paused. She thought of Marcus, bragging at the gala, holding his champagne. She thought of him on his knees in the boardroom. She felt a distant echo. Not pity, not anger. Just distance, as if looking at a character from a book she'd finished long ago. "Donate it," Serafina said. "Donate it, Ms. Walsh. Have the trust buy the entire collection and donate it to the City Library for their annual fundraising auction. I'm sure Martha will get a good price for it. It will fund the children's reading program for a year." She turned a quiet humiliation into a public good, without a second thought. "Of course, Miss Walsh. The jet is ready. Shall I have the driver take you to the Gstad Chalet for the weekend, or the penthouse in New York?" Serafina smiled, a real, genuine smile, the kind of smile she hadn't had at the gala. "Neither," she said, shrugging on her simple wool coat. "Take me to the airport. I want to go home." "Home, Ms. Walsh?" "To my apartment," Serafina said, heading for the door. "The one above the bakery. I promised Buster I'd be home in time for his walk." Evelyn watched her go, the most powerful woman in the world, walking out of a palace of kings and into the cold night air, not to claim a throne, but to keep a promise to a rescued dog. She was no longer Serafina the Mouse or Serafina the Queen. She was, finally and completely, Serafina Walsh, and that was more than enough. Serafina Walsh proved that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. She didn't just get revenge. She reclaimed the brilliant mind her ex-husband tried to bury. What Marcus and Chloe saw as no ambition was simply a fire waiting for the right fuel. And in the end, the mousy librarian didn't just get the last laugh. She bought the whole company. What did you think of Serafina's incredible transformation? Have you ever seen someone so underestimated come back and completely change the game? Let us know your favorite twist in the comments below. If you love stories of justice, karma, and incredible true-life drama, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss a single story.